Hi, I'm Alex and welcome to 52 Miniatures. This video is sponsored by Crippled God Foundry. In this video I'm going to be painting a lot of undead. Think zombies, skeletons, vampires, ghosts, ghouls. All from Crippled God Foundry. Now, have you ever smelled a zombie? Yeah, so I'm wearing a mask. Health and safety. A lot of people in this miniature painting hobby seem to appreciate straightforward linear how-to videos. This is not going to be one of them. Sure, there will be a definitive how to paint a skull recipe, also one on red cloth, and zombie skin, speed painting, slow painting, using oil washes, not using oil washes, using regular washes, not using washes at all, oil paint, contrast paint, zenithal priming. In other words, this is a video on what it's like to have miniature painting as a hobby, and me trying to slightly rub in your face that to get some of the best looking undead this side of the grave is more about inspiration and visual storytelling than it is using specific products or techniques. Well, apart from when you paint skulls. I have in my hand the perfect beast, a corpse gatherer from Crippled God Foundry. Crippled God Foundry, by the way, purveyors of highly detailed fantasy-themed miniatures, accessories, and terrain pieces as 3D printable files for your favorite RPG, tabletop game, and wargame. Well, they must have either a necromancer, a butcher, or one of them crazy scientists whose hobby it is to try and reanimate corpses by the use of shiny brass knobs and lightning working for them as a sculptor, because this thing is just awesomely revolting, in a good way, and a perfect canvas for painting reanimated undead. It's got both skulls, skeletons, and is like a one miniature zombie horde, all in one wriggly intestine-wrapped package. My favorite way of painting skulls, skeletons, and zombies starts with a zenithal prime. This can be done with a rattle can or an airbrush. First priming the miniature black, then once the black is dry, dust the miniature with a brighter paint from up top and at about a 30-degree angle, pointing down towards the miniature. I do this dusting layer in 2 steps, the first with a light grey colour, pretty excessively. Then a more careful dusting with a white. The result is a relatively bright grayscale, and the miniature feels like it's lit from a cloudy sky. To bring out some of the finer details, I move on to a white dry brush using one of the massive makeup brushes, giving some really smooth highlights. I try to move the brush from the top of the miniature moving down, once more to mimic the sense of light coming from an imaginary sky, probably filled with flies and whatnot. In the grand scheme of things, we could say we're done with preparations here, but I tend to be a little detail-oriented. Also, I like textures. Brush textures. I go in with a flat brush with a little white paint on and a light hand and do what is apparently called an overbrush, lightly touching the brush over the raised areas. Sort of like a dry brush, but a lot more light-handed and with more paint on the brush, giving me some extra bright highlights but also a little brushed-on texture. All this work is a foundation to use transparent paints on top of. The zenithal prime and dry brush will give us depth and contrast. The transparent paints will give us color. First off, the mother of all skull colors, umber. I'm diluting this ink with Liquitex matte medium, roughly 2 parts ink to 1 part medium. This produces a more flowing style paint than if I would be diluting with water. You can use Lamium medium or contrast medium or whatever medium you have lying around. And dilute until you get the right skull tone for you. And then simply cover the skulls, making sure you get in all the nook and craniums. And if you wanted, you could be done here. I'm going to do a little highlights, again mainly because I like brush textures. I simply add umber ink to some of the white paint and start stabbing the brush around. Some might say skulls and skeletons are white. This is true sometimes, when bone has been picked clean by animals, insects, and bleached in the sun, or been chemically bleached, or in popular culture. But buried bones tend to go brown on you. Old bones too, sometimes very brown. And for me, this is one of the keys to creating good-looking undead. Look at them as if they're something real and not fictional. You have a skeleton horde, do all the zenithal prime and dry brush steps, then dilute varying batches. Some of your reanimated dead can be dark brown, some hardly brown at all. Some might even be black, charred by fire, some stained by corruption. You know, skulls used to have flesh on them. That's kind of how it starts. And that stuff, the flesh, starts to rot and change color. A great place for all kinds of little creatures and organisms and mold and moss to thrive. Imagination spurred on by realism is a great way to tackle undead. Mold on a skull doesn't even have to be excessively realistic. Maybe a teal greyish mold looks better. That's fine, too. And why stop at green? There could still be remnants of some form of flesh. Adding some umber to a violet creates a great dried, half-rotting flesh kind of color. All these applied heavily diluted with water to tint the surface and not take over and ruin all the previous work completely. Zombies were never a huge thing when I was a kid, and I kinda missed out on the more recent influx in zombie TV. Honestly, I scare too easily to enjoy anything more horror than Ghostbusters. But in my mind, zombies are people, sort of like shuffling corpses who like to eat brains. They have difficulties talking because their tongue has rotted and, not having a brain is a bit of a speech centrum impediment. My corpse gatherer here is built of, you guessed it, corpses, but I'm going to treat it like I would a horde of zombies. Now, the foundation is exactly the same as previously shown on the skulls, the zenithal prime and the dry brushing. Now I mix my own semi-transparent, pale, cold-toned Caucasian skin tone. Essentially, you can mix your very own skin tone using a red, a yellow, a white, and black, and some blue, which is sort of what I'm doing. For the white, I'm using a white ink, and for the other colors, I'm using relatively transparent paints. The result is a very thin skin tone that colors the surface, but still lets a bit of that zenithal primed surface shine through, retaining a sense of depth, like the skin tone equivalent of contrast paint, I guess. The key here, though, is the white ink. The rest could be anything transparent, like contrast-style paints or inks. After a while, I alter the base mixture, adding some umber ink for brown skin tones, more red or yellow for varying tones, black Templar for dark skin tone. Different skin tones like this are great for many reasons. One is obvious. A zombie horde would not discriminate. All brains are tasty. The less obvious reason, something I sometimes find overlooked in a zombie, is the varying stages of decay. I do not have a PhD in corpsology, but I do know flesh does not stay fresh for a very long time. And just a little green shimmer is far from the truth of decay. Varying levels of brown and black is a little more on point. And then starts a painting journey based more on literal gut feeling than anything else. If a combination of paints makes your stomach feel like you've had one coffee too many, or if you can actually start to imagine what your painting smells like, then you're going in the right direction. A mantra of words can also be helpful. Entrails, pus, fat, bloating, drip, bile, or rot. Using violet, green, yellow, orange mixed with some of the skin tones already on the palette, and I'm beginning to imagine this thing actually wriggling in front of me. I do think the more neutral skin tones, let's call them dry zones, are important, to then be mixed up with wetter, leaky qualities, the yellows, the violets and greens and oranges. It's the contrast between what's on the outside versus what comes from the inside that really sells a zombie look. At this point, we're very much at the tabletop standard. If you intend to use this miniature for a D&D campaign or something like that, and you still have the rest of all the encounters to paint, please do move on. For those painting a zombie horde but still want a little more finesse, let's continue. Lacking a bit of bite in the shadows, thus lacking a little contrast, sometimes common when using transparent paints over a bright zenithal prime, I decided to dig out my regular Citadel washes. Again going for nasty. On some of the parts, mainly some of the skin, I wash everything. But mainly I try to get the wash in the crevices, cleaning off any massive staining on the raised bits. I don't want to just slap a wash on everything. That would uniformly stain everything, and that's the opposite of what I want. That Ryclan flesh shade, though, is great for adding a rotten orange hue to things. And then highlights, and this is where the serious fun begins. There is an awesome nastiness to using the wrong quote-unquote paint when highlighting. Highlighting entrails with Caucasian skin tone paint. Highlighting green skin with a light grey. Highlighting brown skin with green highlights. Highlighting entrails with a bright yellow. Highlighting Caucasian skin tone with a bright yellow. I think you can see where I'm randomly going here, and it's nasty. And so, in general, when it comes to colours, there is a decaying look to everything. Mission accomplished. A great way to enhance the warm sense of said decay is to balance it out with some cold tones. I quite roughly painted on thinned down, cooled blue tealish paint in a lot of the areas that are facing down towards the earth. Areas that feel like they're in shade. This would work out well on regular zombie minis as well if there's a need to balance things out. Or just go for a cooler choice of ripped clothing or weaponry. And finally, theatrics. As stated previously, I believe the road to great-looking undead folk is to lean on realism. What does rotting flesh actually look like? But then crank some theatrics on top of that. Nothing sells undead like blood effects or bile oozing out through split stomachs. While on the subject of theatrics and blood effects, do you remember Oscar, the monster hunter? I once dimension traveled to occult Napoleonic times and filmed him for a day while he was out chasing werewolves. Probably one of the most expensive intros to a miniature painting YouTube video ever made. Dimension travel does not come cheap, gentle friends. If you haven't watched it, please do. But anyway, not only did we discuss the most accurate paint for blood, the flavor of grilled werewolf, and Osprey Games' tabletop game, The Silver Bayonet. We also made a bet of sorts. Against whom is still in question, but see, the game, Silver Bayonet, takes place during alternative history Napoleonic Wars. And Oscar's immediate response, looking at the book, was, I bet there will be a Silver Bayonet Egypt expansion. I asked him why. He said, well, obvious, that's where all the actual occult things happened to Napoleon. Oscar then showed me a map of Egypt at the time and talked about the search for lost cities in the desert, or was it an actual lost desert, of cults worshipping occult creatures, of Napoleon's mysterious exit out of Egypt. All sorts. Osprey Games, or Joseph McCullough for that matter, the author of Silver Bayonet, know nothing of mine and Oscar's bet, and what we'll win if we're right, I'm not sure. I did try and get a hold of Oscar for more precise details, but he was unfortunately out on his ship, hunting pirates. True story, sort of. And by the way, if you're interested in actual sailing on a ship, or eco-friendly shipping for that matter, check out Oscar's ship, the Greyhound, and Greyhound Ventures, linked in the description. At any rate, my mind was set on one day playing the Silver Bayonet in an Egyptian setting. I even went to Egypt and looked around for that fabled desert cult, but all I could find was sand. And so when Crippled God Foundry reached out and asked if I would like to paint some miniatures from their June miniature release, The Cursed Sultan, based round the story of a vampire sect in the desert capturing people for sinister purposes, I thought a Middle Eastern Prince of Persia-styled vampire, Crusader Knight Ghouls, a djinn, and then the big corpse thing. I mean, for once, I'd be half prepared, with miniatures, for a game that might not even come to exist because I've made it up together with a person who lives in a parallel dimension and slays monsters for a living. It's perfect. It beats digging around in the sand anyway. Apart from the Corpse Gatherer, kind of a scary name that, my favourite minis in this release are the Crusader Knight Ghouls. I mean, what a great combo. And then I thought, if one plays wargames, usually undead armies contain a lot of miniatures, what we would call hordes. A zombie seldom comes alone. Neither do skeletons. The good thing is, undead can be the perfect folk to paint efficiently. The visual idea that they are very old and therefore bleached, stained and worn out, or have been buried in a grave for some time and are therefore bleached, stained and worn out, can play in one's favour. So, to demonstrate, me and my son painted 2 Crusader Knight Ghouls. They've been zenithal primed, a simple dusting of white on top of black primed miniature. We paint some simple details with transparent paint. Red Crusader cross, brown leather belt, some thin down blue contrast paint on the skin and some metallic paint on the armor. I was a little fancy and added some black contrast paint on the chainmail, but in total, that sped up film clip you just saw is roughly 12 minutes. A 12-minute paint job. My son, by the way, painted the bloodied hands without any input or encouragement from me. He's already grasped the theatrical aspect of painting monsters. After I put my son to sleep, I brought out some oil washes from Scale Color and grimed these miniatures down, making sure to avoid the skin. The major part of the miniature can be dirtied as long as the skin stays bright. Undead bright. Bright skin and some blood effects. That will make the miniature still pop on the table. Oil washes are great for this. An easy and swift way to achieve good-looking results in the grime department. And one can clean up the surfaces that get too heavily stained with the aid of a cotton bud dipped in a little white spirit. On my miniature, I highlighted the skin to an almost white and painted on some blood, inspired by my son. I didn't have the heart to alter my son's paint job by adding any highlights. I think it's awesome without. And this is probably the fastest I've ever painted a miniature. And I think it works. Oh, you should probably go get a drink or something now. There's still another 2 miniatures to go. Stretch your legs at least, or even just your arm. Just a little reach forwards towards the like button. Oh, and see that subscribe button. Click that one too. There we are. Much better. We're now going to paint a vampire. I think this sculpt is great, a lovely simple pose, but it's not the most obvious vampire. So here is how to paint great looking undead. Tip number, well, there's been a lot of them. Skulls, zombies, paint with your nose, get your kid to paint the minis for you. Anyway, the tip is go for cliches. There's a lot of cliches around when it comes to undead, and sometimes they can really help. I'm going to paint this Arabian Nights vampire in traditional vampire attire. Black, red, and white. I mean, even the vampire emoji is black, red, and white. In the end, I kind of just wanted to see if the cliche colors would do the trick, but also enjoyed a more traditional approach to painting this miniature. Starting with the black base coat, adding thin layer by layer of paint. I'm very careful with separation here, quite detailed brushwork, but I tried to not paint over the black everywhere, making sure I get black separating lines wherever they're needed. The red robe just looks so luscious, rich, and frankly evil when shaded down to a black in the deepest folds. The white is a lot more interesting with the deep black recesses. I mean, this could even be how to spend a very long time painting a mummy tip. But seriously, if there is time and patience to do this type of painting, the result can be quite striking. The saturation on this red cloak far surpasses anything else painted in this video. I was actually so convinced over how well the Dracula cliché worked that I freaked out on the skin tone, ending up in Smurf vampire territory. Maybe destroying the vampire vibe just a little, but it was at the same time a fun leap from the initial gore and bile of the corpse gatherer. And that is one of the great things with this hobby. There's so many ways to paint a miniature. In the end, they will look different depending on the technique used. I mean, the difference between the 12-minute paint job and the several hours on a red cloak is evident. But if you're playing a game with these in the heat of things, so to speak, dice flying across your vision, that difference narrows down quite a bit. And so I thoroughly enjoy painting in different ways to not get bored with the one technique, to look forward to trying something new, to having a so-called palette cleanser every now and again. And this very much happened with this djinn here. I mean, she's very much a djinn, even though I opted out the oil lamp she's appeared out of. But I want her to become more of a ghost, at least something a little more evil that I can play as a ghost-type character. But I was not really finding the inspiration, and so halfway to nowhere, I changed medium. To challenge and inspire myself, I decided to paint her with oil paints. These specifically from Scale Color. I haven't had the chance to try them out, and I mean, I've never previously painted a miniature with oil paints, not more than oil washes and glazes. It was a very different experience, a lot more different than I thought it would have been. I sort of roughly smeared on paint that I then smoothed and blended with a less smeary brush. Trying to get distinct brush strokes, something I do use quite a lot for textures, was virtually impossible. I think I sat in a trance for about an hour or so just trying to get a grasp of how the paint works. And I didn't really get anywhere with the actual ghostly feel, but being in that little oil paint bubble for a while did give me ideas. Theatrics, more theatrics. First, some black eyes. Then, my favourite oil paint for anything dead or hellish, purple madder. Also, a deeper blue. I shaded and stained the ghostly skin with purple madder, painted some blood dripping from her eyes, resulting in a more demonic look. Theatrics, remember. Also, toning in both purple madder and Prussian blue in the smoke and the hair to get a slightly otherworldly feel. I mean, she's still a djinn, but maybe not one I'd ever like to meet. I'd say I could definitely play her as a ghost or demon. This Crippled God Foundry release contains a lot more miniatures, all pre-supported if one wishes. There is also scenery pieces, a little complete 3D printable adventure package, really. Oh, and all the minis come with great looking bases, even the big one. I just felt the need for desert. Links, of course, down below. Joining their Patreon not only gives access to the monthly release, but several welcoming package miniatures and discounts. Thank you, Crippled God Foundry, for sponsoring creators like myself and for the great miniatures. So, yeah, please do check them out. I hope you've enjoyed this video. In the end, I think the path to great-looking undead is to figure out what they really would look like if they came knocking on your door. To try and get that nightmare out of your head and down on your miniature. To then add theatrics. And if worst comes to worst, stick to the cliches. And maybe add a teal blue to the shadows, and you'll be alright. Thank you for watching, and thank you to my lovely patrons. It's lovely there, by the way, the Patreon. You should try it. It's nothing like a desert sect with sinister purposes, and we hardly ever eat brains. Bye.